Okay. Testing 1, 2. So what I really think is important is this, that, and the other thing. And no, quite frankly, when we talk about what's going on, it's going to be important to know that law enforcement is so forth and so on. All right, cool.
Exactly, Chief Koen. They're friendly here. Friendly people.
Oh yeah, no, they're
So they must just get furious when people.
the
You know what I mean?
no, but
I mean, people, law enforcement.
yeah, but so again,
Is there something special going on here?
what's that?
Is there something special going on in St. Officers?
Yeah, no, yes, there is. They have a small enough community to care about them.
Yeah.
Is that something? Their community is small enough for them to actually be able to and want to care about them.
Yeah.
So,
Once you get comfortable.
right. So they talked a little bit about the cop house, so I do want to talk about that. I want to talk a little bit about this blue line, if you can talk about it. What else do we want to talk about? So one of the efforts that we're trying to do is to get other chiefs to talk about stuff.
Right. So the importance of communities hearing directly from officers and from chiefs. And, you know, is there enough communication? Does the community hear enough of what it's like to be an officer? Let's get you talking.
Testing 1, 2, testing. So we're going to be here with.
Get a little loud.
Yep, we're going to be here with Chief Anderson.
Like, yeah.
And yep, so this is exactly probably the level that I'll be talking at, or talking with, or using as my voice as we have conversations with the chief, and we want to make sure that these things can be heard and understood. And
Okay, you're good. And checking out my test. 1, 2, 3, check. 1, 2, check, test. I think we're good there. So what we're missing on my equipment, which I really strongly believe in, is the limiter, which when you're not talking, shuts off your line, gets rid of all the background.
okay,
You know, but
it'll work. The limiter.
I'm sorry, the gate.
The gate.
Actually. The gate is what does that.
The gate
The limit
orator.
limits.
So do you have one more plug that I can plug this laptop into this?
Yeah, I could get the, let me rearrange this. This will be here.
And then I can plug this laptop in. Because right now it's streaming
It's gonna.
video.
Yeah.
But just in case.
Oh, you're streaming.
Well, sort of. I mean,
Okay.
I'm recording the stream. It's not
According to the laptop?
right.
You're not, okay.
But I also want to make sure that the laptop doesn't die on me. So here we go. Sweet. Thank you. All right. So as soon as the chief is ready,
Yeah.
we're ready. Other things. So blue line. How do you make tough calls, or what?
I may ask, just my experience as a community member, just kind of like, do they see this, what I've seen with the sign battle, Black Lives Matter, support the police, like what do you say to the community when that's going on? You know?
Yeah.
And if it, and run with what you want,
So,
and if I,
but the other thing is like, so
and I don't want-
Islamophobia. Because lots of people have been talking about.
You just leave. I mean,
Okay, no.
Yeah.
But I need you because
well, yeah, I know.
you don't know. There's tons of stuff that I do know.
Right.
Blah blah blah. But there's tons of stuff that you need to find out.
Right. I know.
For our listeners.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we may find that this. We'll see what we find.
Sure.
So. Let me, Chief, maybe just waiting for us.
Yeah.
So
Oh, just let. I think. Yeah. Anything we want to touch on the intro? Are we gonna go to it?
So-
Just the usual.
yeah,
Do we want to try to make this recording an entirety episode in itself?
yeah.
Not like add a intro later. So just the.
What do you mean not add an intro?
Well, I mean, like we're not going to add like a reflection on this later to the beginning of.
Well, I mean, I don't know.
Well, I guess we don't know.
We don't know.
Okay, ready. Where do over there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you want that door closed, or you worried about any background or
Yeah, we should-
interference?
maybe we should.
All right.
Close it. And Chief, I'm also on the laptop. I'm recording video.
Okay.
So,
You get comfortable.
Okay,
I'll
good.
I'll bring the
I'm
mic
comfortable.
to
Right.
you.
Cheers. So we got audio and video.
yes, sir.
We'll kill that.
You
Okay, I'm good.
You good there?
Yes, sir. I'll sit up straight and tall like I did in first grade.
So so we're so last week's show, and I don't know if I've sent you. I know we're connected through social media. I think I'm not sure.
I did get something from you last week with
Okay.
some feedback on it.
Yeah. So I
Uh,
sent. So the video that you did about a year and a half ago. People are still giving responses to
Yes,
that.
and I was reading those comments.
Yep. So
Yeah.
positive, real positive stuff.
That's good.
And there hasn't been any negative stuff because I would have given that to you too. So there's that. And then we used a piece of that interview in our podcast last week. I
The one
think.
when you guys were here, or no, last week?
So the
February 2015, just you were here.
right. So when I interviewed you, we used a clip of that interview in our podcast that we did last week,
Okay.
which I think I may have sent to you, but I may not have.
That was basically the part where you were talking about what you look for in an officer
Right.
when you're hiring.
I didn't get that one. I got the one you sent last Monday on Halloween with
Okay.
the comments.
Okay.
Um,
So what prompted this conversation or us wanting to talk with you was really thinking about how police departments and officers aren't able to, or oftentimes willing to talk about their perspective as an officer, given a lot of the things that are happening in the world. And so we wanted to spend some time with you and talk about some of those things. And so part of the agenda that I have, and again, I don't believe in we have a relationship, so I want to maintain that.
Oh, for sure.
Is to talk a little bit about the cop house, this idea of the hot spots and why you selected that. And then if you could kind of talk a little bit about this idea of the blue line, right? So from a community's perspective, there's a blue line that either officers can't or won't or don't know how to cross, or maybe that even isn't a thing, but the community thinks that it is, which sets up this idea that blue lives matter versus black lives matter versus all lives matter and all that kind of stuff. So and then Brian has some questions just around.
Yeah, I was commenting just me as a community member and in St. Anthony, what I see, one of the things I see is this kind of this sign war where there are people putting Black Lives Matter signs in your yard, and then across the street, we support the police, and there's this tension in the air in the community, and it's tough to make sense of, because we want everybody to be well, you know?
Right.
It's tough to make sense of that, and I do.
Welcome to my life.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And that's what we want to.
Yeah.
That's what we want to hear, like what your life is. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention though, which is this idea of Islamophobia. Like, you know, it was very interesting to watch that Fox interaction where they were trying to goat you into a divisive stance, and you really captured the moment and solidified the fact that we need to be working together on this, and that divisiveness doesn't serve our community. Right. So I'll ask you also to kind of talk about that. And so how do you, as the chief law enforcement officer, rally the community around this idea that we continually need to work together, both not only as a philosophy, but actually in practice? How do you do that in practice? So we're going to do a short intro, and then we'll get into kind of have some conversations with you. And how would you like to be identified? Chief William Blair Anderson, Chief Anderson?
Doesn't matter. You're the host.
Yes,
however you want.
Yes, sir.
You and I go back a ways, so however you wish.
Yes, sir.
All right. Should we comment on the downloads for October? Just a thanks to the listeners.
Yep.
Okay.
So just want to say thank you to the listeners. We've had over how many, Brian?
We had over just under 1,100 for October.
That is sweet.
Just starting at the beginning of October. It's back up to our names.
Yeah. This is Andre Koen.
This is Brian Jost.
And we are your armchair activists.
Thanks again for listening, everybody. Check out the website, armchairactivistpodcast.com. And thanks, listeners, for spreading the word about this podcast. Over, I think it was about 1,070 downloads for October.
For October alone.
And just we launched episode 1 October 5th, I think.
Yeah.
So we're doing okay. Thanks, everybody, for spreading the word.
Yeah. So we took the show on the road, and we're here in great sunny St. Cloud on one of these historic presidential election days. And so I think this is a great time to talk about what the future offers. One thing I will say is no matter who becomes president today, that there is going to be a lot of work to be done, a lot of healing to be done, because both candidates have done a great job of opening up some old wounds and creating some new ones. So we have lots of work to do, and I don't think they have the power to heal. I think we do, but that's a whole nother podcast. So today we're here with Chief William Blair Anderson, the executive and chief of law enforcement here in St. Cloud and
Minnesota.
Yeah, we want to we want to thank you for taking your time to be with us today.
Oh, anytime. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that we're curious about in terms of kind of some of the things that you're doing right here in St. Cloud. So what are some of the innovative or powerful things that you're doing in St. Cloud to really engage equity and justice for all, so to speak?
Because the list is that long, but what's coming in the very near future is what we call a community outpost, a cop house. And I have to give credit where it's due first. We did not invent this concept. We simply borrowed it from the city of Racine, Wisconsin, and modified it to fit our community. And so what that is we take a property in a neighborhood where we tend to get the most calls for service, whether they are nuisance calls, all the way through the full spectrum to criminal activity. But it's one of our quote unquote hot spots. And we determine this obviously by using data. We're in a data-driven world, and that's no different for us in law enforcement. Data and technology serve us well in some respects. So we crunch the data with our data analysts, find that hot spot, find that particular place that's creating the most problems for the people who live in that neighborhood or on that block. We started a 501c3 public safety foundation to purchase that house so that we wouldn't burden the taxpayers. And what we plan to do, and we just closed on that house last week, and what we plan to do is staff that house with police officers. It's not going to be a substation. We're not there as oppressors or occupiers. We're there as facilitators. And that house will be used for everything from after-school programs for kids to tutoring programs. It'll be another outreach post for our neighborhood associations, which are very strong and very active here in St. Cloud. We will partner with some of our other public partners, whether it's the county, and of course this city sits in 3 counties, so there's no shortage of opportunities there. Some of our private partners like Centricare, and I could go on and on. That's why I started this by saying that, because I really could. There will be a community wellness component with Centricare and some of the other healthcare providers. And so right now the sky's the limit. And we're only going to be limited by our imagination. So we are very excited about this. Again, we closed on the house last week. The current house will be raised. We will build a new house there. And again, donations to the Public Safety Foundation will help us sustain it and keep up the maintenance on the house without burdening the taxpayers. The idea, and this has worked wonderfully in Racine, and I would encourage anybody who would want to see how that works or who doesn't believe that it works to go there. The idea is once that neighborhood is stabilized again, you turn that over to the people who live there, right? They help us get them their neighborhood back, for lack of a better way of saying it. And then the idea is you sell that house because it is still a residential property and you move on to the next hotspot. Now, interestingly enough, what happened in Racine, and they started this program because they were literally under siege. If you don't know the geography, Racine kind of sits in the middle of Milwaukee and Chicago. And they were literally overrun in the mid-90s with violent crime. And so we're not nearly at that point yet, which is why we took the concept and modified it. But it worked so well there. When they got the first neighborhood stabilized, and I saw this, so this isn't something that I heard. And it came time to shut that house down and sell it and move to the next one. The citizens literally stormed City Hall and begged them not to go. Ooh. And they didn't. And so now Racine has 7 houses, which is more of a testament to how successful that program has been, as opposed to a referendum on how awful crime is there. So I want to be clear about that. And we're jacked about
That's
this.
Cool. Yeah. I've never heard of that.
Yeah. So can you give us just a brief synopsis of the of the demographics here in St. Cloud. Because there's a joke about St. Cloud being called White Cloud, right?
There is, and that's no longer applicable. Now, at the same time, let's remember that we are in Minnesota. And most anywhere you go in Minnesota is going to be 80 to 90% white, give or take. St. Cloud is no different. It is still predominantly white, but there are more ethnicities here. And all you need to do is take a walk. If you walk outside my office now and walk 3 blocks into downtown, you would see every ethnicity there is to see. And so it is a joke. And I know when people refer to St. Cloud as White Cloud, they haven't been here for a long time. Mm-hmm. There's also some myths. And I heard another one just last week that there are over 10,000 Somalis in St. Cloud, which, if that's the case, so it's not. It happens to be false. There's probably 5,000 to 7,000 immigrants in all of central Minnesota. And that includes everybody, not just Somali. But for those that have an agenda, and our East African population is in their crosshairs now, those are the kinds of yarns that they spin. Those are the kinds of myths that are put out there. And the sad part is you can't control that sort of thing. But what gets discouraging is when people react to that without knowing what is actual and what is factual.
Yeah. So you're saying that Sharia law isn't impacting how you do your work? Yeah, no, we're still rolling with the Constitution here.
Andre, what did you say? Sharia?
Sharia law.
Tell me more.
So Sharia law is a form of government that governs a sect of Islam.
Okay.
And so there are lots of folks who believe that Islam is overrunning the Constitution, and that this particular sect is driving government and government decisions. And so
and that eventually it will be instituted and become the law of the land.
Right.
Here, which is absurd.
Which is okay, cool. Just want to make that clear, because there are lots of people who, again, you said certain groups of people are in their crosshairs, and I was just sharing with some folks that we always have a boogeyman, and it seems like this particular new immigrant population happens to be that particular boogeyman.
Yeah, it's their turn, which is sad. And again, the some of the things that people say or that they choose to believe strain credulity at best, and are just cruel at worst. And so that's one of the most irritating things, and one of our biggest challenges right now is debunking these myths and trying to get people to understand. And the best analogy I have is one that our Native American friends use, and it tends to lighten the mood no matter where or who's in the room, and that is, you are all illegal immigrants at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
But for some compassion, but for some forward-thinking people hundreds of years ago, I mean, where would any of us be now? I personally can trace my family lineage back to about 1760. One of my mother's cousins has done that, all born on American soil. But of course that still doesn't take us all the way back.
Right.
So it's it's a matter of perspective.
Yeah.
Right. There's room for everybody here.
Yeah. And I find it interesting. So the listeners, I would encourage you to go on YouTube or Fox News or whatnot, and look up Chief Anderson, because there was an interesting encounter that I thought was very interesting, because what was powerful about that encounter wasn't so much the rhetoric that was trying to be used, or the emotions that were trying to be spurred, because that wasn't particularly original. But what I thought was really interesting was the chief's response to that particular piece of dialogue. And can you kind of can you set the picture for you know, kind of what you thought they were after, and then your masterful response to that.
Well, I appreciate the compliment. It was just how I felt. It's how I was raised. So, you know, any thanks for that goes to my parents and to my upbringing and my surroundings as a kid. We had a horrible, tragic attack at the Crossroads Mall. We had a young man who, for whatever reason, and this is now in the hands of the FBI, our part of the investigation here locally has been completed, but went on a rampage in the mall and stabbed 9 people. Was confronted by an off-duty police officer, and he was shot and killed. The attacker was, which of course brought all kinds of attention to St. Cloud and the national and international media. When they bear down on you, you could feel their considerable weight. At any rate, they were all here. And I know that the mayor and I spent the better part of 3 days doing interviews. In this particular interview that you referenced, they proceeded my comments, and it was Fox News. They proceeded my comments or any questions that they were going to ask me and the mayor with some commentary from the Republican nominee for president, Donald Trump. And of course, it was fear-mongering. It was divisive. It was polarizing, right? We could go on and on. And I don't care what your political affiliation is, right? My job requires that I'm neutral when it comes to stuff like that. But they again, played some of his nastier comments that we've all heard and some of his rhetoric during this arduous campaign that I'm so glad is ending, but that's a whole nother podcast too. Mm-hmm. At any rate, they immediately followed up by asking me what I thought about his comments. Well, first of all, we were still unraveling a massive crime scene. We had victims. We had witnesses who had been traumatized by this. And I've seen the video, obviously. I had seen it by that time. And so between those things and making sure that our community was okay, you know, what Donald Trump had to say was the last thing on my mind. And so I thought it was interesting that they would start out, and that was the first question, by asking me what I thought about what he said. Now, you know, in my mind, and I'm from the hood, obviously, in my mind, the first thing that came to my mind was, I don't give a damn what he said. That's immaterial right now. But I didn't say that over the airways. And so I answered them honestly. I answered them the way that I was raised. I answered them according to my own value system. And my answer was, I'm not, my job is not immigration policy. It's public safety. And right now, this is a public safety issue, no matter who the suspect was. And it happened to be a young Somali. And again, my answer came from my heart and my values and my upbringing. And I asked that they not be divisive now, because that wasn't the time. It was the time for cohesion. It was the time for us to try and start down the road, you know, to healing, for lack of a better way of saying it. So if that was masterful, I'm guilty. But, you know, more than anything, it's just how I feel. It's from my heart.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like the media trying to add the usual drama. You know.
Yeah. No. So how do you, as the chief law enforcement officer, balance the tension of these horrible things that are happening in community and trying to uphold and continue your mission of public safety, while having the tension of the community either not understanding what that means, or, I mean, going back to what you were talking about in terms of the signs, right?
Right. Because as a resident, and again, not in St. Cloud, but in St. Anthony, Minnesota, I pick up on this vibe of either, it seems like other community members want to claim that either they're supporting just the police or they're supporting Black Lives Matter movement. And I don't hear much of a discussion about how do we do both? How do we, support everybody? And then I think it creates this wall. Like, I don't hear a lot from police officers in the community. And maybe I'm missing it. Maybe I don't know where the communication is. Maybe I don't know where it is.
Yeah.
And
so how are you doing that here in St. Cloud? How are you bridging all those tensions?
Here's the good news. The city of St. Cloud, and when I say that, I mean everything that is encompassed in the city. And it starts at City Hall with our mayor, with our city administrator, with our elected officials, and everybody in between. Not just the police department, but all the other city departments. Not just our public partners, but our private partners and our corporate partners. This is something that the city of St. Cloud has been working on for a very long time. And so you tend to get more credence from the community when they have a history of you being transparent, which is critical, right? Of you being doing your job with humility and respect and honesty and compassion. And again, I'm not indicting any other agency. I'm telling you what happens here. And it's one of the reasons why after the horrible mall attacks, there were some rumors that swirled around for a little bit, but within a few weeks, we were back on the road to recovery because you saw that cohesion. And so it's more difficult now than it was when I got into law enforcement 21 years ago. But again, for me, everything I need to know to try and make those things work, that outreach piece, that community engagement piece, my parents taught me before I was 5, because it all centers around how you treat people, period, right? I don't have the luxury, we in law enforcement don't have the luxury that other citizens have. And by that, I mean, we must remain neutral, right? We are fact seekers. It doesn't matter where those facts are coming from. It doesn't matter what zip code the person lives in or how much money they have or education they have. When they call, we come. And we're supposed to be coming to provide service, the same level of service to anybody. That sounds corny as hell nowadays, but that is what I believe. And that is what I demand out of my staff here. And that's what the citizens of St. Cloud get. And so we're able to counteract a lot of that rhetoric just with application. And again, it's something that has been going on for a long time here. We just recently had our 11th annual Create Community Conversation on Race. And that is a huge all-day program that is meant to celebrate our ethnic differences and talk about how we are all the same at the end of the day. And so that's something we're very proud of here.
And that put on by your police department?
No, again, that's a citywide initiative, right? The Create Community group is made up of elected officials, private citizens, and corporate partners. And again, it's just a testament to how seriously we take that stuff here. But it is challenging nowadays because if it happened somewhere, it's happening anywhere. Unfortunately, that's some people's mindset. And so oftentimes we're responding and answering questions about incidents that didn't happen in our city. And so, again, for us in this profession, neutrality is critical, right? And we're all human beings too. I think we've done a better job of letting people see us as human beings, and because that uniform is a symbol of a lot of things, right? It's a symbol of service. It's a symbol of sacrifice. But depending on who you ask and where they live and in what era they lived in, it's a symbol of oppression. right? It's a symbol of brutality. It's a symbol of a whole bunch of other negative things. And so, you know, for us and for me, it's important that people understand that there's a human being behind that uniform, and we are here to be of service to you, period. It is my privilege, it is my honor to put on my badge and uniform and go out and be of service to other people.
So Chief, how do you, so there are a couple of things that have kind of been tossed out, particularly around law enforcement, and it's this idea of cynicism and implicit bias. And so how do you encourage, or how is it that your officers are able or taught to fend off this idea of cynicism or implicit bias? How do you?
Good question.
Yeah.
You know, what we're doing with the newer generation of officers, meaning the ones that are coming in now. I have a few simple questions that I ask before they get to the meat and potatoes of the screening process, right? Before they delve too deeply into the screening process, which is arduous, lest people think it's not. The screening process to become a police officer is, well, arduous is the best word. I've used it 3 times now, but it's appropriate. I ask a few simple questions, and the most important one is, have you ever volunteered? I don't care how much they can bench press or how fast they can run or how quickly they can scale a 6-foot wall or any of that stuff. If the answer to the question, have you ever volunteered, is no, I can't use you. And the reason that I feel that way is because if you can't do something for someone without expecting anything in return, you're not going to do as well at this job as someone else who has that mindset that it's service before self. So that's how we handle the newer generation that's coming in. In terms of some of us older ones that are here and dyed in the wool, if you will, and been around for a while, what has worked for me to stave off the cynicism is volunteering, right? Because we see people in various stages of humanity, and a lot of them are not good. When I say we, I mean police officers. We run towards what everybody runs away from. We see people at some of the worst moments you would ever want to see any human being. And it's easy to become cynical after doing that for a decade or 2 or 3, right? It's easy to lose your faith in humanity if you don't find some other ways to restore it while you're doing that. So I encourage my staff to volunteer. I certainly can't make them, but that's part of our officer wellness. We encourage them to go out and pick a charity, wherever you want to do it. I don't care where, I don't care how you do it, but I encourage that. We also instituted fair and impartial policing biannually here. It's not right now, it's not required by the state of Minnesota or by the Pulse Board, which is our licensure. But I felt it was important enough, because here's the thing, I'm a realist, right? Everybody has some biases. I mean, if you like red wine over white, that's discriminatory. Now, it's certainly not in a pejorative way, and so I don't mean to minimize other nation, be they gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, whatever. But when you break things down, simplicity, right? So they're all there for us. We're all products of our environment. Now, the key is being able to manage those and not letting those drive your decision making. And so that's what the fair and impartial policing training module helps our staff do. So I sent 3 of my supervisors out east to do the train the trainer so that they can come back and we can share that not only with our agency, but throughout the whole region or whomever wants to take part in that. Again, it's not mandatory by the state yet, but we've been doing it now for a couple of years, and we try to get that in biannually.
So who runs that? Who trains the trainers? Who is What's the organization training?
That's a good question, and I would have to dig through my files to find out. And I know it was an agency out of California that started this whole concept with a how do I say it, with an educator. We'll say that, and I can get you the details on the origins of that.
And we'll put that in the show
if you
notes.
like.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know.
Yeah, I can do that for you as soon as I get an opportunity to dig through my files here. But again, it's something that's important to us. You know, we encourage our officers. I put it this way: one of the things we don't do enough is talk about the positive things that are going on. And I learned that when we brought in an independent auditor to do an efficiency study of this agency when I took it over, because I wanted to know, what are we doing well and where can we, you know, shore up some of our efforts. And you know, there may be others who sit in my chair all over the country that may not want to hear that. They might not want to hear about the things they don't do well. Okay, well, I'm not afraid of that, because that's how you get better, right? You can't stick with a bad plan and expect things to change. And so one of the things that I learned when that audit was complete was that you guys do a lot of things very well, but nobody knows.
Yeah.
Nobody knows. And okay, well, we're doing our job.
Just doing your job.
So on the one hand, that's great. But on the other hand, perhaps the times we live in now dictate that we probably need to talk about some of those things a little bit more. And so I'm really proud. I get notes, I get emails, I get letters from people all day that say, wow, I was driving by the Southside Boys Club and I looked out and saw a bunch of kids playing basketball and there was 3 cops out there playing with them. I mean, that kind of stuff moves people. It seems like a simple thing, but evidently anymore it's not. But you know, that's what this job was founded upon, right? It was that
how
kind
do
of
you let the
interaction.
community know something like that great little thing that just occurred with them playing basketball? Like, how do you let the people know that that's real?
I share it. I share that information when I get an opportunity to speak with our local media, whether it's on the radio or via the newspaper or something like this. I share it because I do want people to know. I make sure that I share it with the rest of the staff. I make sure that I write my staff letters on a regular basis, because of the size of our agency. A lot of them don't get to see myself or the other command staff members on a regular basis. And so it's important that they hear from us. It's important that they hear how we feel about what's going on in other places, and how much we appreciate what they do and how they do it, right? And so I can substantiate all of that stuff with those kind letters and those cards. And it makes me feel good. It makes me proud to work with and for them. It really, really does. Again, you know, it sounds corny, but those are the kinds of things that help to build cohesion, right? I believe in the merit system. And so, you know, if and when something does go sideways, you got a strong foundation to stand on.
It also sounds, though, like there's a kind of this two-way thing where you are open and you have some lines of communication with the community to be able to get that feedback from them, right? So yeah, no, I think that's extremely powerful, that community members do feel like they can contact your office and say, I saw 3 officers playing basketball with kids, thumbs up on that.
Or call me. It's interesting that you said that, because during the mall attacks, again, one of the questions from the media, and it was a national media outlet, was, you know, it seems like your community is holding together. How did you guys accomplish that? And one of the members of the clerk, we all do a lot of outreach and engagement with, gave his opinion, Reverend James Albers. And I will thank him forever for this, because he summed it up a lot more succinctly than I each other's phone numbers. If I need to talk to the chief, I can call the chief. I don't have to call the chief's office. I don't have to talk to his assistant. I've got his phone number. I've got the mayor's phone number. You know, our mayor invites citizens to his home and he cooks dinner for them once a month.
Hmm.
He gives people his home phone number. If I need to call Reverend Alberts or Willie Jett, the school superintendent, or whomever, I got his phone number, right? I don't have to sift through 3 layers of bureaucracy to get to the source. And I think that's something that we do very well here. And that goes for any citizen. You don't have to have a bunch of letters after your name to have my phone number.
Yeah.
Call me, because I need to know if something's not right, and I need to know when things are right.
So there's also, I mean, Brian alluded to this a little earlier around kind of some of the things that we were seeing in the metro. There's this kind of blue lives, black lives kind of thing. And there is a perception in the community at large that there is this thing called a blue line or a blue life. Is there some truth to that, or is there some mythos associated with this idea of a blue line? Like officers won't do the right thing because they are beholden to their brothers and sisters who are also blue more than they are beholden to doing the right thing.
So here, I'll surmise it for you, for me.
For your perspective.
This is
Yes,
what
sir.
it means to me. And again, I'm a realist. Has that been invoked as this quote unquote line in the sand where we watch each other's back, you know, at all costs? With all the police officers in America, I think we'd be short-sighted if we didn't think that that may exist somewhere. Here's what it means to me. In fact, it's our international symbol as well, right? The black flag with the blue line down the middle. So that part's legit. It's not something that somebody made up, a bunch of cops somewhere, and decided this is how we're going to symbolize the quote unquote bunker mentality. No. What it means to any right thinking good police officer worth his or her salt is the line between peace and anarchy, right? What it means is the line that we are going to step up to keep those predators off of people who can't protect themselves. Now, has that been exploited? Perhaps throughout history, but that's what it means to me. And it also means to me that, boy, if I'm in trouble and I hear my brothers and sisters coming, I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to breathe a little bit easier because I know they're coming. And I know they're coming for the right reasons. And so that's what it means to me. Now, others have taken it and exploited it. And if they want to link on this very small percentage of police officers that soil this uniform and this badge, that's their right. So that's the beauty of America. They fear of reprisal. But, you know, the vast majority of police officers are doing it right, and they're doing it for the right reasons. So again, I try and tear down that proverbial wall and debunk those myths about what that means. You know, I was sitting on a panel with some folks from a lot of different areas, and the person sitting next to me was representing Black Lives Matter. And, you know, my comment then is the same as going to be now, is that all lives matter. And that person took that as me diminishing the struggle or what Black Lives Matter claims that they're representing out here. Well, that's not how I meant it. I meant that everybody, and see, once again, that's how I was raised. My house looked like the UN when I was growing up. My parents had friends from all walks of life, all ethnicities. It didn't matter. If you were a human being, if you had kindness and love in your heart, you were welcome at our home. So I'm guilty because that's the system I was raised under, right? And so that's the one that I know best. And so I'd be lying if I said I didn't take offense interpreting what I said and telling me what I meant without asking. It's another If you're not sure about what I meant, ask me. Don't tell me what I meant based on your interpretation, especially if that's not what I said. Because I try and choose my words carefully because words are powerful, right? Words have started and ended wars. And so you have to be careful about how you say things, right? Everything, your tenor, all of that stuff matters. And so when this person took what I said and twisted it into me diminishing people of color, well, first of all, I was highly offended by that because last time I checked, I was a black man. I grew up in America. I know all too well what it feels like to be profiled, to be singled out, to be judged by the worst element of my group. I know all that stuff. And so it was frustrating to have to go back and explain that, well, okay, no matter where you're coming from, don't all lives matter? At the end of the day, isn't that what they're saying? Everybody's life matters. Now, I get where they're going. I struggle with the methodology. And I'm old enough to remember. There's a reason Dr. King and the Southern Christian Leadership Council and all those agencies that helped us make great strides in terms of race relations did it without being violent, right? Because guess what? That becomes the story, right? The violence becomes the story and what it is you were really trying to do. And so that's what I grew up watching. And the older I got, the more I understood, right? Because when you're younger, you're going, hey, wait a minute. They're turning dogs on you. Hey, man, fight back. Hit that guy back. He hit you first. No, because then that becomes the story. They had greater plans. Their ideas and their ideals were far more reaching. That cop standing in front of them at that particular moment with the Billy Club, they were already well beyond that person's purview, in my opinion. So that's what I would like to see more of. We got to stop talking at each other. We got to stop yelling and screaming. We need to just sit down and listen and then respond to what is being said, not what you think you heard. The great Judge Judy said it best. God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Mm-hmm. You should be listening twice as much as you're talking.
Yeah. So where do you personally get input from community members? I don't know, are there town halls to go to city council meetings? Where do you get the input from community members?
Town hall meetings. The mayor holds one every Tuesday. Sometimes he uses this facility. This is a community building. All are welcome.
And you attend?
Absolutely. Yeah. When I can, absolutely. We have very nations. They have regular meetings. We have planning commission agendas. I mean, you name it. SCPD is involved somewhere, and in some instances, there are dedicated staff members to make sure that someone from this agency is always in attendance. And we do have our community crime impact team, and they're responsible for reaching out to those neighborhood associations to help solve problems from something as simple as a parking issue to a greater nuisance that could boil over and become more tensed, a more tense situation. You wouldn't believe how my neighbor's garbage can is 3 feet over the property line can escalate to something more serious, but for some intervention and some cooler heads prevailing. So we're all over all of that stuff. If people call and they have complaints and they want to air them, we have a process for them to do that. If advocacy groups think that we need to be more involved with something, we certainly listen to them. And if we have solutions that will help whatever their issue is, then we jump on it. Mm-hmm. So there's a variety of ways that, again, that we, engage our community. One of the things that happened before I got here that speaks to that is this is a signed document right here with about a dozen advocacy groups. And it outlines what they can expect from us, what behavior they can expect from St. Cloud police personnel, how they're going to interact, how we're going to interact with them. And it's just a phenomenal tool because it's not just a document. This is something that we have been living by for to the point now where we realize that it's time to dust this off because things continue to evolve and change. And there are things in here now that 15 years ago we probably don't need anymore. And so we will replace those with something new. So, I mean, I'm always open.
So this is almost like a community contract. Like
exactly,
you've signed a kind of self-binding
exactly
contract with the community and said, this is how we will react. And it looks like with the number of community groups that are also signed onto that they also said that this is how we will also respond and react and work with the police on community. I think
this is the epitome of the social contract.
Yeah, no,
concept.
it is. Yeah, like you said, the epitome of the social contract.
And it works because we all have placed that much stock in it. We recognize the importance of it, particularly back then, but there's no need now to stop doing that because things aren't as bad as they were 20 years ago or 30 years ago or whatever. No, let's keep making improvements where we can, and let's keep making strides together. So I tell you what, this is a model city. I don't care what anybody says. And we've had our turn in the hopper. We've gotten lots of it. It's usually from people and places. It's usually from people who haven't been here. And it's usually from media outlets, no clue. And when I tell you some of the things I've read about St. Cloud and heard are flat out wrong. Some of them are lies, but other folks run with them anyway. And so how do you stop somebody who's blogging or podcasting or doing whatever in Seattle? This is a true story. Responding to a rumor which turned out to be a lie that was started, somewhere else about St. Cloud. It went viral, and then I spent 2 days talking to news outlets, telling them that didn't happen. But you can't unring the bell.
Yeah, it's funny. I got into a big fight on Facebook, on social media, about some of the events that happened in St. Cloud, and people were making all these accusations and all these things, saying all these things about Minnesota and particularly the Somali community and all this stuff. And I was like, I asked the question. I said, how many of you that are making these statements live in Minnesota? How many of you live in St. Cloud or in the Twin Cities? And none of them did, but they all had, they all knew and they had opinions.
And
my grandfather said,
it's one thing to have an opinion, but they have very strong opinions.
Very strong.
That are usually wrong. And I don't hesitate to call them out when I encounter those people. Because to me, the best antidote for that kind of stuff is truth and transparency. Right? Because where do these folks we're talking about like to operate? They like to operate in anonymity, right? They like to move in the shadows and the darkness because they really don't have anything on the line. They can roll that grenade in the room and step back and watch the fireworks, and then somebody else has to come and clean up the carnage. So when I find those people, I like to call them out, shine a little light on them.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for an illuminating conversation. It certainly gave me some things to think about that I hadn't, and ways to look at community policing that I think will be valuable both to our listeners and personally. And as always, I thank you for being forthcoming and speaking from your heart and giving your perspective in obviously an effective way to create a community policing agency that the community can respond to.
Well, I always appreciate it, my friend. Now I'm gonna I'm going to embarrass one of my hosts here a little bit, because one of the things that I admire most about Mr. Koen is simply this. Now, here's another way that we try and engage our community, and it's through our youth initiatives. And one of those is a youth leadership academy that we do for at-risk kids. And I was doing this down when I worked in the Metro, and when I came here, I brought it with me. Again, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Modify it and make it work for your respective community. Andre has been there every single year, imparting wisdom and helping us give these young people some tools, not only so they can navigate this minefield we call life, but stave off a lot of the rhetoric. And this isn't indoctrination, but let's face it, there's a lot of rhetoric coming at you. And it's hard for us to sift through, so especially for young people. But Andre's always there. It doesn't matter when we call or what we ask for. His answer is always yes. And so we need more of that. So see, that's how I engage community. He doesn't even live here, but he's never said no to an opportunity to engage with the citizens here, be they adults or kids. So for that, you have my undying admiration. You know that.
I appreciate
that.
I appreciate
so, and it's an ongoing effort. That's what I want to leave the listeners with. This is something that we work on every day. This is actually part of our daily diet. All day, every day. We've got several different engagement or outreach initiatives happening all at one time. So it's something that we take very seriously here.
What's the stress level you've experienced in this line of work?
Same as every other cop. I drink too much. I don't eat right. I don't sleep well or regularly. I'm a cliche. I'm divorced. I mean, it's, one of my mentors told me that this job, this profession has ruined more marriages than any affair. He called it the mistress. And I mean, we do what we do, and the people that love us sacrifice way more than we do so that we are able to do this. And I haven't gotten to the horribly dark side when we start talking about suicide in law enforcement and other mental health issues, because we don't take very good care of ourselves. And so, some of that I say tongue in cheek, but there is a much more horrific side to this with way more dire consequences than not getting enough sleep or having a poor diet. Those are things we can change. I can have, one rum after dinner instead of two if I chose to, but two does me just fine.
No, and I also think it's interesting that you said this before. You did a drive-by on it, that there is a human in that uniform, and sometimes, particularly when community members are caught up in their own, fantasies or disasters or problems, it's sometimes difficult to keep that in focus. That I'm also dealing with a human being who is in that uniform or in that role, or
and you know what, and I'm gonna sound a little bit duplicitous, but it's more incumbent upon us than them to let that side of us shine through. In other words, what I mean is that's what it means in law enforcement to be a professional. Sure, we have the same issues that every other person has going on in their lives, whether they're family issues or financial or whatever, right? But that's not the public's fault. Therefore, they should not be on the business end of that. So one of the other things I did when I got here was I installed these emotional dumpsters around the perimeter of the building. They're invisible. And the direction to the staff was that before you cross the threshold here to provide service, you leave all your garbage in there, all of it. And they stretch from here to infinity so it can hold whatever you put in it. Now, if you want to pick it up on your way home, be my guest. But the public is never subjected to what is going on with you personally, because that's not their fault. That's not what they called for, and they should be able to expect better than that. So I had a reporter ask, so are you saying that cops don't get to have a bad day? And my answer was, no, we don't. We don't get to have a bad day. Do we recognize that as humans we do, and we're going to? Yeah. But my expectation is that no, you don't get to have a bad day because you weren't drafted. You chose this profession, so do it the right way for the right reasons. So if that puts undue pressure on people, yeah, well, I'm sorry, because when the public calls us, they should be able to expect that they're going to get a fair and impartial, unbiased representative of this great profession to help them resolve whatever issue they called us for. So just call me corny guy. I know all this stuff sounds, but this is how I roll, period.
And people like corn. They also like cheese. So be cheesy and corny.
That's the truth.
So
Were there more notes that you had?
nope, I covered everything that I needed to cover.
Chief Anderson, thank you so much for letting us visit.
Thank you. Yep.
And for your time.
My
Really
pleasure,
appreciate
guys.
it.
Thank you for having me. Anytime.
Yep.
Really
Yep.
appreciate it.
So this is Andre Koen.
And Brian Jost.
We are your armchair activists, and we're out of here. Cool.
Yeah, thank you.
How we do, gentlemen?
Thank you. I think we did wonderful.
All right.
What you
think so.
think, Brian? You did- Yeah.
Very useful.
So
Very useful.
part of our hope
Mm-hmm.
is that folks who are not as highly evolved as you are will be encouraged to think and talk about some of the stuff you talked about
Right.
openly, because we don't think there's enough transparency
Right.
for folks to do that. So I appreciate you being transparent.
Absolutely. That's what we need, man. We need people putting their energies towards that. Opposed all this other business, this crazy rhetoric going on.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
It's
you know,
no
and something you
good.
said stood out to me because our last guest said the same thing, and that there's too many people talking at each other.
Mhm.
People talking with each other. And that is
Gotta get there.
a ton of that.
Gotta get there.